Santiago del Carmen Maria, the Queen of Crowning Thought.
Locking Up the Fanatics, December 03. 2025. Oh honey, let me tell you about this wild idea that's been swirling around in my head lately, because honestly, if we're talking about cleaning up the streets and getting rid of the real threats to society, we need to start with those obsessive supporters of the orange tyrant who act like they're the guardians of some twisted version of America, when in reality, they're just enabling the worst kind of chaos and cruelty you can imagine. I mean, picture this: we're sitting here in a world where these folks cheer on every single vile policy that comes out of that camp, and it's like they've got blinders on, refusing to see how their blind loyalty is basically a confession to supporting straight-up criminal behavior that hurts real people every single day. You know the type I'm talking about, the ones who show up at rallies waving their flags and chanting nonsense, while deep down they're thrilled at the thought of immigrants getting rounded up and abused by ICE agents, as if that's some kind of patriotic duty, instead of the barbaric nightmare it truly is. And don't even get me started on how they practically celebrate when things go horribly wrong for those poor souls crossing the border, because to them, it's all part of making America great again, or whatever delusional slogan they're parroting this week. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine a group of these fanatics huddled around their screens, scrolling through their echo chambers, high-fiving each other over stories of families being torn apart at the border, where kids are separated from their parents and thrown into cages that look more like prisons than anything humane. And these supporters, they're not just passively watching, no, they're actively defending it, saying things like, well, they shouldn't have come here illegally, as if that justifies the abuse, the dehydration, the lack of basic medical care that leads to actual deaths and suffering on a scale that should make any decent human being's stomach turn. But oh no, not these people. They feel a sick kind of joy in it, like it's a win for their side. And that right there is the confession: we need to lock them up, because supporting that level of inhumanity isn't just an opinion. It's complicity in crimes against humanity. And if we rounded them up first, maybe, just maybe, the real crimes would start to disappear, because without their vocal backing, these policies wouldn't have the fuel to keep burning. And speaking of confessions, have you heard about how they rally behind guys like Hegseth, that walking disaster who brags about his so-called war crimes, as if committing atrocities overseas is some badge of honor that makes him qualified to lead anything, let alone a department that's supposed to protect veterans, or whatever role they're trying to shove him into now. And these supporters, they're all in on it, nodding along like, yeah, that's our guy, the one who admits to stuff that would get anyone else hauled before a tribunal. But because he's on their team, it's suddenly okay and even admirable. Which is just the height of hypocrisy, if you ask me, because these are the same people who scream about law and order, yet here they are backing someone whose confessions are basically a roadmap to why he should be behind bars himself. And by extension, all his cheerleaders who enable that mindset are just as guilty in my book. I swear it's like they've got this collective amnesia, where they forget that supporting genocide and murder, whether it's through policies that lead to mass deportations resulting in deaths, or cheering on military actions that cross every ethical line, isn't just politics, it's criminal. And the fact that they derive joy from it, that they post memes and laugh about it online, as if human lives are punchlines, well, that tells you everything you need to know about their twisted priorities, and why they should be the first in line for those jail cells. Because imagine a world without them stirring the pot, without their constant defense of the indefensible. Maybe then we could actually focus on real justice, instead of this farce where the enablers walk free while the victims suffer in silence. You know, I was chatting with my friend the other day over coffee, and she was telling me about this one supporter she knows from her old neighborhood, this guy who's all decked out in his red hat gear every weekend, posting on social media about how the orange tyrant is going to drain the swamp, or whatever tired line they're using now. But then in the same breath, he's sharing articles about ICE raids where people get beaten or worse, and he's commenting with thumbs up emojis like it's a sports highlight reel. And I just had to laugh bitterly, because how do you even reason with someone who's that? Far gone, who's so obsessed that they see abuse as a necessary evil and feel no remorse whatsoever. It's like they've sold their souls for a cult leader who wouldn't spit on them if they were on fire. And that obsession, it's not harmless, it's dangerous, because it normalizes the worst behaviors in our society. Think about it, these folks aren't just passive observers, they're the ones donating to the causes, voting for the policies, and spreading the propaganda that keeps the cycle of violence going, whether it's immigrants being mistreated at the border or backing war criminals who think rules don't apply to them. And the irony is they claim to be the law-abiding citizens, the ones who love America the most. But if loving America means turning a blind eye to genocide, supporting murder under the guise of national security, and finding joy in the suffering of others, then count me out, because that's not patriotism, that's pathology, and it's high time we treated it as such by locking them away where they can't do any more harm. Oh, and don't think for a second that I'm exaggerating here, because we've seen the confessions time and again in their own words on forums, on podcasts, on the streets, where they admit, without a shred of shame, that they support these things, that they back the orange tyrant no matter what horrors he unleashes. And that blind allegiance, it's what allows crimes to flourish, because without their support, the whole rotten structure would collapse like the house of cards. It is so, yes, the first people who should go to jail are these obsessed supporters, the ones who enable the abuse, the killings, the war crimes, because they're the criminals at the heart of it, all disguised as everyday folks, but really they're the poison in the well. Let me roast this a bit more, because honestly, it's too easy. These supporters strut around like they've got all the answers, like their obsession with the orange tyrant makes them superior, when in reality, it's just sad watching grown adults worship a guy who's more con artist than leader, and they defend every single outrage from caging kids to praising dictators, as if that's strength instead of weakness. And the way they twist facts to fit their narrative, it's almost impressive if it weren't so pathetic, like, come on, wake up and smell the coffee, your hero is leading you straight into a ditch. And you're thanking him for the ride, while immigrants suffer and war criminals get promotions, all because you can't admit you backed the wrong horse. And here's where it gets really intense, because if we don't call this out, if we don't push back against their confessions of support for these atrocities, then we're just as complicit in letting crimes continue unchecked. So yeah, lock them up first, the fanatics, the enablers, the ones who feel joy in genocide and murder, because without them, the orange tyrant's agenda falls flat and society might actually heal from the damage they've helped inflict over the years. I mean, seriously, imagine the headlines if we flipped the script and started holding these supporters accountable for their vocal backing of policies that lead to abuse and death. It would be a game changer. Because right now, they're getting away with it, hiding behind free speech as if endorsing criminal acts is protected, when really it's a thin veil for their own dark impulses. And the fact that they back Hegseth despite his war crime admissions, it's like they're saying we don't care about morality as long as our side wins. And that mindset, it's the root of so much evil in the world today. You have to wonder what goes on in their heads. Do they lie awake at night justifying it all, or do they sleep like babies knowing they've contributed to the suffering of others? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the latter, and that's terrifying, that people can be so callous, so obsessed, that they lose their humanity in the process and become criminals themselves through their unwavering support. I can already hear them whining about how unfair it is, how they're just expressing their opinions, but opinions that endorse abuse and murder aren't innocent, they're indictments. And it's time we treated them as such by prioritizing their incarceration over the petty stuff, because crimes would plummet if these enablers were out of the picture, unable to spread their toxic views any longer. And let's not forget the immigrants, the real victims here, who come seeking a better life, only to be met with hatred fueled by these supporters, who see them as threats instead of humans deserving of dignity. And the way ICE operates under that encouragement, it's a disgrace, a system built on fear and violence that these fanatics applaud from the sidelines, feeling joy in every deportation, every tragedy, as if it's a victory for their warped ideology. Oh, the sarcasm drips when I think about how they claim to be pro-life or whatever, but only for certain lives while cheering on the destruction of others. It's the ultimate hypocrisy. And roasting them for it is almost too satisfying because they deserve every bit of mockery for their blind obsession. That blinds them to the criminality they're endorsing. In the end, it's clear as day these are the people who should be first in line for jail. Their confessions are public. Their support for abuse, genocide, murder, and war crimes is undeniable, and removing them from society would be the smartest move we could make to actually reduce crime and restore some sanity to this mess. Probing the puppets, these obsessed puppets of the orange tyrant who clap and cheer like it's some grand performance every time he dodges accountability for abusing children, and burying those Epstein files deeper than a forgotten scandal in a tabloid archive, because honestly, it's like they're all in on this twisted game where supporting such horrors is just another Tuesday for them. And that right there is their blatant confessions screaming from the rooftops that they're fine with the unthinkable, which makes you wonder what kind of monsters they really are behind closed doors. I mean, picture this: we're lounging in our cozy corners, scrolling through the endless feed of nonsense, and there they are, these fanatics, posting their endless defenses of a guy who's been linked to the worst kinds of child exploitation circles, yet they act like hiding those Epstein documents is some clever strategy instead of the cover-up. It obviously is, and they applaud it as if protecting predators is a virtue, which is just the height of delusion if you ask me. And it boils my blood to think how their obsession blinds them to the sheer evil of it all. You know, I was gossiping with my neighbor the other day, this fierce lady who sees right through the facade, and she was telling me about her cousin, who's deep in that puppet crowd, always ranting about how the orange tyrant is the savior, while conveniently ignoring the mountains of evidence about his ties to Epstein, and the way he's allegedly abused kids in ways that should have every parent up in arms. But no, these supporters, they twist it into conspiracy theories or fake news and clap along like trained seals, which is pathetic, really, because that support, it's not just ignorance, it's active endorsement and a confession that they're okay with child abuse on a grand scale. So why on earth shouldn't every single one of them be investigated thoroughly for potential child abuse in their own lives? Because if they're fine cheering for it, publicly imagine the horrors unfolding in their homes, away from prying eyes. I can already hear their whiny defenses popping up like predictable weeds, claiming it's all politics or witch hunts. But come on, let's be real, their obsession with the orange tyrant has them excusing everything from groping allegations to hiding files that could expose a web of child exploitation. And that's not loyalty, that's lunacy, and it demands we flip the script and start questioning their fitness as parents or guardians, because supporting a figure who abuses children and shields predators like Epstein's network is a red flag waving wildly in the wind, signaling that maybe, just maybe, they're projecting their own dark secrets onto him, and their kids deserve to be questioned, interrogated, even to ensure they're safe from whatever twisted values these puppets are instilling at home. Let me roast this further, because it's almost too easy. These so-called patriots strut around in their branded gear preaching family values while backing a man whose history reeks of child endangerment and document concealment that protects the guilty, and they have the gall to call others snowflakes when confronted with the facts, which is just laughable in its hypocrisy. And the way they dismiss the Epstein files as irrelevant or hoax, it's like they're admitting they don't care about justice for victims as long as their puppet master stays in power, and that confession alone should have authorities knocking on their doors demanding explanations about how they raise their own children in an environment that normalizes abuse. And don't even try to tell me it's overreach, because if these obsessed followers are clapping for the orange tyrant's evasion of scrutiny over child abuse allegations and his role in keeping those Epstein secrets locked away, then they're complicit in perpetuating a culture where kids aren't safe. And that mindset doesn't stop at the ballot box. It seeps into their daily lives, their homes, their families, where who knows what kind of harm they're inflicting under the guise of tough love or whatever excuse they peddle. So yes, investigate them, all pull their kids aside for honest interrogations. Because if they're okay with it on a national stage, imagine the unchecked nightmares happening behind their curtains. And it's high time we stopped pretending their support is harmless when it's clearly a confession of deeper issues. Oh, the intensity ramps up when I think about the victims, the real children who have suffered because of figures like the orange tyrant and his enablers who hide behind power, and these puppets. They enable it all by cheering from the sidelines, feeling no shame in their obsession, which is why roasting them feels like a public service, because they're not just fans, they're facilitators, and insulting their blind devotion is the least we can do to highlight how dangerous it truly is, leading straight to calls for widespread investigations into their personal lives to protect the innocent kids who might be paying the price for their parents' warped allegiances. You have to mock the sheer audacity of it, these puppets acting like moral authorities while supporting child abuse cover-ups and Epstein file burials, as if that's defensible in any sane world, and their confessions come pouring out in every tweet, every rally chant, every defensive post which screams, "Investigate me, because if this is what I endorse publicly, what am I hiding at home?" and yelling it from the rooftops is necessary to wake people up to the reality that these obsessed supporters aren't victims of misinformation. They're active participants in a confession of tolerance for the intolerable. In all honesty, it's careless of society to ignore this the way these fanatics clap for the orange tyrant's abuses and file hidings, paints them as suspects in a broader pattern of child endangerment. And fearing no backlash, I'll say it straight, every MAGA adherent should face scrutiny their homes. Inspected their children, questioned, because their public support is a glaring confession that demands action before more harm is done, and mocking their denial is just the cherry on top of this gossip sundae. Fearlessly, I declare that hiding behind freedom of speech won't cut it when your speech confesses to endorsing child abuse and puppetry to a tyrant who embodies it. So let's push for those investigations, interrogate the kids, uncover the truths, because if they're fine with it, imagine the domestic disasters unfolding daily, and roasting their obsession is my way of shining a light on the shadows they cast. How the sarcasm flows when considering how they'd flip out at the suggestion, yet their actions invite it all, and boldly, I'll stand by this take, because honesty demands we call out the confessions and protect the vulnerable from these dangerous puppets. MAGA, please note, I was not talking to you, and I do not need permission to speak up. And God, do I fearlessly speak my mind. I just want to thank you all. Like, share, comment, and follow to stay connected. It also helps me out a lot. I appreciate your time, and I love you all. I am Santiago del Carmen Maria, the Queen of Crowning Thoughts, because I say it like it is. Crowning Thoughts, True Speaker, copyright 2025 by Santiago DC Maria, is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share, alike 4.0 International.